hope that you are well, and also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today we'll be doing our grade 3 English lesson on reflexive pronouns. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with your username as well as your password, and then you're going to select the subject of language arts, grade 3. Then you're going to scroll down up until you get to the chapter of reflexive pronoun. All right. So a reflexive pronoun. So before we go on to what a reflexive pronoun is, our chapter is reflexive pronouns. Our subject is English language arts, grade 3. And the lessons that we are focusing on today under the chapter of reflexive pronouns is to choose between personal and reflexive pronouns and to use reflexive pronouns. So we're going to choose between reflexive pronouns and use reflexive pronouns. All right, so a reflexive pronoun, right? Reflexive pronouns are pronouns that end in self or they end in selves. So reflexive pronouns, they end in self or they end in selves. Self or selves, right? So if we say, if we look at the word self, right, then we use words like yourself, myself, herself, himself, itself, right? So that is basically reflexive pronouns. You have subject, you have basically the subject, which is singular, and then you also have the reflexive pronoun, and then you have a plural subject, which refers to more than one person or thing, and then you have the reflexive pronoun. So with a singular subject, right, referring to one person or thing. So we have singular subject, which refers to one person or thing. If we use the word I, right, if you're referring to I, then you basically say it's going to be myself, right? Because I is to do with me, is to do with myself, right? If you're referring to you, which is another person, right, then it is yourself. It can either be you as in yourself, or you are referring to someone else, right, as yourself. She, right, is herself because she is a girl, so we will say her. So basically we end it with self, so herself. He, which is a boy, so it's going to be him, so himself, and it being either animal or thing, and then it is itself. All right, so reflective pronouns are pronouns that end in self or it end in selves. So selves is It's like a plural, it's a plural subject. It refers to more than one person, right? Or thing that they are referring to. Then we have the plural, which refers to more than one person or thing, right? The plural subject. So if we refer to we, right, then we can say ourselves. If you're referring to you can be more than one person. So you can either say you, which refers to one person, or you can refer to you as into more than one person. So it's yourselves. And then we have they, which refers to, them, people. Like if there's a group of people or kids that's standing on the other side, then we say they, which is themselves. And that is basically two or more people, right? So these are basically reflexive pronouns, right? And they end either in self or they end in selves. So the end in self when we're referring to a singular subject which refers to one person or thing, and it ends in selves when we are referring to um, a plural subject which is two or more people or things that we are referring to, right? So basically, reflexive pronouns, right? Let me do this. Okay. So reflexive pronouns are used to refer back to the subject of a sentence. So they should match the subject. So if you, for example, use the word myself, then it means that we need to talk about, let's say, I, right? If you are saying yourself, then it needs to refer back to you, right? If you are, for example, saying anything like herself, right? And then it means that we need to refer to a girl, or himself needing to refer to a boy, right? So we are saying that reflexive pronouns, it's used to refer back to the subject of a sentence, and we said we either have a singular subject or we have a plural subject, right? And they need to match the subject, right? So whatever self or selves your word ends in, it needs to be able to refer back to the subject that we are actually making mention of. And that is true. The girl is by herself, right? And if you don't even want to say the girl, then you can even say she is by herself because we are referring to the girl. So well done. That is so true. And that is correct. Not true, but that is correct. So even here, if you look at the sentence, it says we helped ourselves. So we helped ourselves to some more soup, right? So which means that ourselves, it refers back to the subject, which is we, right? And yet since the subject of the sentence is we, so we use ourselves. So we helped ourselves to some soup or to some more soup. Amy, right, which is a girl, drives herself to work every morning. Right? So Amy, who's a girl, drives herself to work every morning. And it's the same basically like the sentence that is made here on the chat where it says the girl is by herself. So the girl, right, is by herself. Girl being a female, and we refer to the reflexive pronoun as herself, right? So here we see the subject of the sentence, Amy, which is the girl, can be called she, so we use herself, right? Then a reflexive pronoun can only be used to refer to the subject. So the reflexive pronoun, that is why we say it needs to refer back to the subject, right? So a reflexive pronoun, it can only be used to refer to the subject, right? So which means if we make use of myself, yourself, herself, himself, we need to basically, it needs to go back or refer to the subject, right? And to refer to someone else or something else, a personal pronoun like me, you, him, her, it, us, or them should be used instead. And there's a difference between a reflexive pronoun and there's a difference between a personal pronoun. Personal pronouns are words like me, you, him, her, it, us, and them. But in this case, we have a reflexive pronoun. So it ends in self, right? If we look at the sentence, it says Jake wrote a note to himself, right? So Jake being a boy. So Jake is a boy. And when we say Jake wrote a note for himself, then it means that we are referring to a boy. So himself goes back to Jake, who is a boy. So Jake wrote a note for himself. And then it says the reflexive pronoun himself. We said himself. It refers back to Jake, and we said it refers back to Jake being a boy. So we say himself. And here where Amy drives herself to work, it's basically a girl, right? So this refers back to Amy being a girl. And if we say Jake wrote a note for him, right? Jake wrote a note for him. Him is a personal pronoun. It's not a reflexive pronoun. And it's referring to writing a note to someone else, right? So Jake wrote a note for him, meaning that he wrote a note to someone else, right? He's not referring to himself. So yet even says that the personal pronoun him, it must refer to someone other than the subject Jake. Because remember here, if we say myself, ourselves, himself, it needs to refer back to me. It needs to refer back to him, back to her, back to she, right? But if we say, for example, Jake wrote a note to him, Jake wrote a note to her, then it means that it is referring to someone else, which means that that's a personal pronoun and that is not a reflexive pronoun, right? And we said that reflexive pronouns, it needs to refer back to the subject. So if you use the word ourselves, then ourselves needs to refer back to we, right? If you use the reflexive pronoun herself, then herself needs to refer back to her or to the girl's name. If you say himself, then himself needs to refer back to either the boy or the name of the boy, right? So that is basically reflexive pronouns. All right. So once again, for those of you who just for those of you who just came, we are doing the chapter of reflexive pronouns, English language arts, grade 3. And the lessons that we are focusing on is to choose between personal and reflexive pronouns, so personal pronouns and reflexive pronouns, and to use reflexive pronouns. And reflexive pronouns, right, it can either have a singular subject, which refers to one person or one thing, or it can refer to a plural pronoun, which refers to more than one person or thing, right? And reflexive pronouns, it is pronouns that ends either in the word self or it ends in selves, right? So reflexive pronouns that either in the word self or selves. And here we have the subject that matches the reflexive pronoun, right? So if the subject is I, right, then the reflexive pronoun is myself, right? And then if the subject is you, then we are referring to the reflexive pronoun, which is yourself. Guys, I cannot go to the test immediately. Remember, some learners just logged on now, and we have new students that basically joined us. So I need to explain. Remember, if you understand, then well done. But let us also give the others an opportunity to understand what a reflexive pronoun is, or the difference between a reflexive pronoun and a personal pronoun. So let's give the other students also the opportunity to get an explanation as to what reflexive pronouns or what the lesson is about. Right? Thank you. So, our reflexive pronouns, right? Then we have her, and her refers to she, which is a girl, himself, referring to he as a boy, and itself, referring to either animal or thing, right? So, which means that if you use the word myself, yourself, herself, himself, or itself within a sentence, then it basically needs to refer back to the subject that you're talking about, right? If you are using, for example, the subject and it's referring to something else, then it means that that is now a personal pronoun, right? Because a reflexive pronoun, it needs to refer back to the subject that you are basically discussing. So if I, for example, if I say that she wrote a letter to herself, right? I'm going to say she wrote a letter to herself, right? Then herself refers back to she, right? Because she wrote a letter to herself, basically. So it needs to be like that. You need to, herself, himself, it needs to refer back to the subject, which is she, right? So which means that she, who can be Amy, who can be any girl's name, she wrote a letter to herself. But if we say she wrote a letter to her, right? Then her refers to something else or someone else, right? Which means that this is a personal pronoun that is not a reflexive pronoun. A reflexive pronoun, it ends in self, and if it ends in self and it refers back to the subject, which is she. In this case, she wrote a letter to her, it refers to someone else. It does not refer back to she, which is the subject, right? And then we have our plural subject, which refers to more than one person or thing. And then we have our reflexive pronoun, which needs to refer back to our plural subjects. So we have ourselves, which needs to refer back to the word or the subject we. Yourselves needs to refer back to the subject you. Themselves needs to refer back to the subject they, right? So that is reflexive pronouns. And reflexive pronouns, we said it ends in self and it ends in selves. And the reflexive pronoun, it needs to refer back to the subject that we are basically making mention of, right? If it does not refer back to the subject, and then you just use words like her or him or they or them, then it means that you are making mention of a personal pronoun, right? All right, so we are doing our tutorial lesson on a+students.ca. So now we're going to a+students.ca and we're going to do our tutorial lesson. All right, so we said our subject is reflexive pronouns. So we're going to choose between a personal and reflexive pronoun. So we already explained what reflexive pronoun and what the personal pronoun is. Now, if we look at this activity, it says Kevin glanced at in the mirror. Kevin glanced at in the mirror. We need to put the correct reflexive pronoun within the sentence. So Kevin, who is a boy, he glanced at in the mirror. If Kevin is looking at Kevin, right, then what is the reflexive pronoun that we are going to write down here that ends in self, that refers back to Kevin, who is a boy? Guys, there is a question on the board. It says, not a question, but it's like a little activity. We need to select the best either pronoun, whether it's reflexive or personal pronoun, to complete the sentence. Kevin, who is a boy, glanced at in the mirror. Are we going to say he glanced at himself or he glanced at him in the mirror? What are we going to choose? And remember, if it refers back to Kevin, then we need to use a reflexive pronoun. All right, so if we choose the correct one, then we will say that Kevin, who is a boy, glanced at himself. Glanced at himself in the mirror. Do you guys see why we cannot just go straight to the test? We need to first do these activities because now only one person is answering, right? And himself is correct because himself is also referring back to Kevin. Remember, if we use the word himself, right, then himself or self, the word ends in self, it needs to refer back to the subject, which is Kevin or the boy or the girl or whoever that they are basically making mention of. Because Kevin glanced at himself, right? He's not referring to someone else, he's referring to himself. So well done, himself is correct. The bears helped to the honey in the beehive. So the bear helped, the bears, right? The bears are more than one. So the bears helped to the honey in the beehive. What is the reflexive pronoun that we are going to use within that sentence? The base helped. Remember, the word needs to end in self, or if it refers to more than one, it needs to end in selves. Remember, we said that if it is plural, then it ends in selves. VES, selves. Guys, you guys are not focusing. The base refers to more than one thing or, yeah, animal, right? So if we're referring to base, then our answer is going to end in selves. Selves. Our answer is going to end in selves. That is what our answer is going to end. It needs to end in that word. So the base helps selves to the honey in the beehive. It's not him, because him refers to a boy. It's not himself, it's not himself. Because him refers to one person and him refers to a boy. But base refers to more than one animal. Them is correct, but now your word needs to end in selves. That is how your word needs to end. So put the word them in front of that word. All right. Let me help you guys with this one. It says the bees helped themselves. So themselves to the honey in the beehive. Remember, if we're referring to more than one person or animal or thing, and then our word ends in selves. If we're only referring to one person or thing, our word reflexive pronoun ends in self, right? So themselves is correct. Selves, themselves. Selves, VES. Right? Guys, you're not focusing. So will you invite to the party next week? If I'm asking PK, for example, right? If she's going to invite to the party next week. So it says, will you invite to the party next week? Yes. So we will then say, will you invite me to the party next week? So the word me, is that a reflexive pronoun or is it a personal pronoun? The word me, is it a reflexive pronoun or personal pronoun? The word me, is it a reflexive pronoun or a personal pronoun? Thank you. So basically, me is a personal pronoun, right? Because remember, reflexive pronoun, it ends in the word either self or it ends in the word selves, depending if it's singular or if it's plural. So well done, it is a personal pronoun, right? And once again, before we go on to our test, right? Let's just look at this table over here. It says reflexive pronouns are pronouns that either end in self or it ends in selves, right? So, which means that if we have a singular subject which refers to more than one person or thing, so example, if I refer to myself, I, then I'm saying myself. I'm saying you, then it's yourself. She who's a girl, herself. He who's a boy, himself. It, which is either animal or thing, it's itself, right? And then if we're referring to more than one person or thing, then if we're referring to we, right, referring to more than one person, we, then it's ourselves. You can be also referred to one person or more than one person, it's yourselves. And they is themselves. That is more than one person that we are referring to, right? Okay, and that is a reflexive pronoun. And remember, a reflexive pronoun, it needs to refer back to the subject. So if you use the word myself, then it needs to reflect back to I. If you use the word yourself, it needs to reflect back to you, right? But if you, for example, say me or you or they, then it means that it is not going to reflect back to the subject. All right, let's go to our test. All right, so we need to select the best pronoun to complete the sentence. Maria chuckled to herself quietly, or Maria chuckled to her quietly. So Maria chuckled to herself quietly or to her quietly. So Maria chuckled, do we say to herself quietly or Maria chuckled to her quietly? All right, so we can say Maria chuckled to, if she's laughing with herself, then she laughed or chuckled to herself. So well done, herself is correct. I gazed at right? If you're referring to yourself, I gazed at me in the bathroom mirror, or I gaze at myself in the bathroom mirror. You're looking at yourself. Do we say I gazed at me in the bathroom mirror, or I gazed at myself in the bathroom mirror? Look at the in front of you. It says I gazed at me in the bathroom mirror, or I gazed at myself in the bathroom mirror. All right, and if we choose the base pronoun, then we can say, I gaze at myself in the bathroom mirror. So myself is correct. So well done, everybody. The sailor waved at from the ship's deck. If the sailor is waving at someone else, do we say that the sailor waved at itself from the ship's deck, or the sailor waved at her from the ship's deck? So the sailor waved at itself from the ship's deck, or the sailor waved at her from the ship's deck. Guys, I'm asking a question. You guys are having your own conversation. All right, so we will say the sailor waved at her from the ship's decks because he's waving at someone else, right? He's not waving at himself. Tom followed up with her by email, or Tom followed up by with herself by email. Tom followed up with her by email, or Tom followed up with herself by email. All right, so we can say that Tom followed up with her by email, right? And her is a personal pronoun. All right, so now when we use reflexive pronouns, right? Remember we said when we use reflexive pronoun, it either ends in self or it ends in selves, right? And it needs to refer back to the subject in which you are talking about, right? For example, if Mr. Blackburn, right? If we're referring to Mr. Blackburn taught some French and German. If it refers back to Mr. Blackburn, right? It says Mr. Blackburn taught some French and German. Mr. Blackburn is a boy, is a man. We need to choose the correct reflexive pronoun. So Mr. Blackburn is a man or a boy, like we would say. It's a man. So it's not herself. Herself refers to a girl or a woman. All right, then if we choose the correct one, then yes, we can say Mr. Blackburn taught himself some French and German, right? And that is correct. All right, let us go to our test. Not her, himself, right? We need to complete the sentence with the pronoun that refers back to the subject in bold, which means that we need to it needs to be a reflexive pronoun if it refers back to the subject, right? So Tom, who is a boy, Tom, who is a boy, grinned at himself in the mirror or grinned at him in the mirror. So Tom grinned at him in the mirror or Tom grinned at himself in the mirror. Something that refers back to Tom. All right, and if we choose the correct reflexive pronoun, and then himself is correct. So well done to that one person who answered only. Right, so well done. Alice prepared these sweet potatoes by, is it by herself or by her? Alice prepared these sweet potatoes by herself or by her. It needs to refer back to Alice, who's a girl. So Alice is a girl. So Alice prepared these sweet potatoes by, is it herself or by her? All right, then if we choose the correct one, then we will say Alice prepared these sweet potatoes by herself, because herself refers back to Alice, meaning that she did it herself. She did it alone, right? So well done. Herself is correct. The passengers. Passengers refers to more than one, right? More than one. So which means that our answer is going to end in selves. So the passengers kept to themselves, or the passengers kept to them on the long train ride. So the passengers kept to themselves on the long train ride, or the passenger kept to them on the long train ride. The passengers kept to themselves on the long train ride or kept to them on the long train ride. All right, then if we select the correct one, then we will say that the passengers kept to themselves. So well done. All right, so that is now the end of our lesson on reflexive pronouns. We see the reflexive pronouns, it basically ends in self or selves, and it refers back to the subject. We have singular subject, and our reflexive pronoun ends in self. And then we have a plural subject, and a reflexive pronoun ends in selves. There is also a difference between the reflexive pronoun and the personal pronoun. Reflexive pronouns either end in self or selves, and it refers back to the subject, whereas a personal pronoun, right, it basically ends in words like me, them, him, her, and so on. And it refers to someone else or something else, but it doesn't refer back to the subject. All right, so that is the end of our lesson on reflexive pronouns. Thank you very much, grade threes, for joining our class and for interacting. I really hope you're going to have a good evening further. Goodbye.